The flames licked across the forest edge in ravenous waves, devouring pine and underbrush alike, sending embers spiraling into the smoke-choked sky. Specialist Maya Chen stood at the perimeter line, her firefighting gear dusty and stained, her expression unreadable as she scanned the chaos before her. The forest fire had doubled in size overnight, transforming from manageable to monstrous in a matter of hours. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya carried her field notebook in her left hand, its cover warped from heat exposure, corners darkened with ash. The pages inside held detailed notes on fire behavior, wind patterns, and flame progression that no one on her crew ever bothered to review. She tracked microclimates, thermal anomalies, and smoke patterns that her colleagues rarely asked about. No one looked through it. Still, she brought it to every briefing, every strategy session, every moment that counted. The specialized equipment she maintained sat ready on the truck, not drawing the attention that the more dramatic tools of wildfire fighting attracted. Her value was in preparation and foresight, in understanding the fire's behavior before it revealed its intentions to everyone else. Maya had predicted 4 major containment successes that week, providing early warnings and evacuation route adjustments that kept everyone safe. She had not been thanked once. That wasn't unusual. Near the command tent, a group of hotshot firefighters leaned against the utility vehicle, water bottles clutched in soot-stained hands, faces lined with exhaustion, but still maintaining their easy camaraderie. One of them glanced toward her and smirked. "Chun's still calculating the fire's mood again," he said, loud enough for her to hear. "Bet she thinks the flames are sending her secret messages." There were a few chuckles. One pantomimed writing furiously in an imaginary notebook. Another tapped his temple and rolled his eyes. None of them looked directly at her. They didn't have to. The mockery was casual, familiar, practiced. Maya had heard variations of it for 2 seasons now. The joke always landed the same way. She said nothing. She checked her equipment one last time, verified the readings on her portable weather station, then moved toward the command console to input her latest observations. The screen barely responded in the harsh sunlight. She shielded it with her hand, typed without hesitation, and uploaded her fire progression analysis. Her notes included an unusual thermal pattern she had detected southeast of the main fire, just beyond the established containment line. It was subtle, probably nothing. Still, she recorded it. Inside the command center, the walls were plastered with satellite imagery and drone footage of the fire's movement. Senior firefighters stood in groups, discussing containment strategies, with animated gestures and voices too loud for the cramped space. Maya stepped past them toward the data terminal, her notebook balanced carefully against her arm. The operation highlights played on a screen overhead, showing dramatic backfires and helicopter water drops. None of the footage showed the careful predictive work that made those operations possible. That wasn't unusual either. A senior team leader from the visiting hotshot crew looked over as she passed. He didn't lower his voice when he spoke to his colleague. "There she is, Chun, probably calculating how the fire's feelings might be hurt by our water drops." His companion added with a smirk, "At least she have documented the fire's emotional state when we put it out." The group laughed. The sound was casual, unforced, familiar. That somehow made it worse than outright hostility. Maya entered her access code, uploaded her latest analysis, and set the terminal to update mode. She moved precisely, each step part of a sequence she had internalized months ago. She never rushed. She never lingered. She didn't ask for space at the terminal. She created it by not reacting to the comments floating around her. The notebook. Pages flipped softly in the generator's fan draft. She caught a loose corner and held it steady until the data transfer completed. Once the upload finished, she removed the book, tucked it under her arm, and turned away from the terminal. "Hey, Chen," called out Captain Rivas, the incident commander, as she was leaving. "What's your read on Sector 7? The eastern flank is giving us trouble." The room quieted slightly. Rivas was respected, and if he was asking for Maya's input, others at least pretended to listen. She opened her notebook to a recently marked page. "The wind patterns are creating a funnel effect through the canyon," she explained, keeping her voice steady and professional. "It's accelerating the fire spread in a counterintuitive direction. If we position resources based on standard progression, models will be outflanked within 3 hours." Rivas nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Recommendations? Shift containment efforts northwest of the current line. The fire will jump the ridge by midday based on my calculations." Someone in the back muttered, "Here we go with the fortune-telling again." A few chuckles followed. Rivas silenced them with a look. "And your confidence level on this prediction?" Maya didn't hesitate. 93%, based on historical data from similar terrain and current conditions. The incident commander studied her for a moment, then turned to the operations chief. "Let's adjust resources accordingly. I want a contingency team at that northwest position." Maya felt a momentary sense of validation, quickly tempered by the skeptical looks from others in the room. She'd been right before, and it had changed nothing in how they viewed her. Being right again might make Rivas take notice, but the crew's perception would remain unchanged. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The laughter continued behind her as she walked toward the exit. Her expression remained unaltered. She had learned long ago that reacting only made the jokes last longer. Back through the outer corridor, the base camp. Noise dropped to a background hum. Fewer people lingered in the auxiliary spaces. Maya moved past the security checkpoint and into the planning room where the detailed work happened. This was the space no cameras ever filmed for news reports. It smelled of coffee and dry erase markers. She sat near the far end of the long table and placed her notebook in front of her, opening it to the last entry where the thermal anomaly had been marked in red pen and circled twice. The official detection system hadn't flagged the hotspot. No alert had triggered. To anyone else, it was a low-confidence reading, background noise in an already chaotic environment. But Maya had seen something in that brief thermal signature. A pattern that carried characteristics she couldn't ignore. The shape was wrong for a standard ember field. The thermal profile didn't match known burn patterns. Someone had dismissed it earlier as residual heat from a controlled burn the previous day. No one had asked her to verify it twice. No one had told her not to either. The camp's PA system crackled overhead and a muffled announcement rolled through the corridors. VIP visitors were assembling for a press conference. Fire crews were preparing for a shift change. The equipment Maya maintained, with its sensors cleaned and batteries fresh, had already been reassigned to the next team. Maya closed her notebook, her fingers lingering on the edge of the cover for a moment. Then she stood, tucked it securely into her pocket, and walked toward the exit without saying a word to anyone. The dismissal stung less than it used to, but it still left marks. She had been the invisible analyst for so long that even she sometimes wondered if what she saw was real. But the numbers in her notebook didn't lie. The patterns she tracked held meaning even when no one else bothered to look. Tomorrow would bring another shift, another chance to prove that quiet vigilance mattered. She just had to keep observing, keep recording, and hope that when it truly counted, someone would finally listen. The command center held the kind of tense silence that only comes during major fire events. Screens displayed infrared imagery of the fire's advance, the red-orange glow of the flames contrasting sharply with the cooler blues and greens of untouched forest. Maya sat alone at her station, radio silent beside her, gloves resting on the desk next to her mug of cold coffee. Her boots were still dusty from the morning perimeter check after the night's defensive operations. She had stayed behind while others headed to the briefing, drawn back to her monitors by something she couldn't quite explain. The thermal anomaly from earlier wouldn't leave her thoughts. It nagged at her like a splinter, small but persistent. She initiated a secondary analysis protocol, watching the diagnostic window scroll through automated checks. The system traced temperature gradients across the sector display, verifying hotspot patterns, wind effects, and fuel moisture levels. Most analysts let this sequence run unattended, trusting the automation to catch any problems. Maya didn't. Her eyes tracked every data point, every pixel of movement on the screen. On the third diagnostic pass, something flickered in Zone 4. It wasn't a strong return, just a brief flare against the mostly stable background, one pixel blinking for less than a second before disappearing again. She paused the diagnostic sequence, rewound 2 frames, and watched the replay. The signal was weak, barely above the noise floor, but it carried a specific signature that made her lean forward in her seat. The heat pattern showed characteristics of a structure, not natural forest material. The thermal decay was concentrated and geometric, not the organic spread pattern of vegetation. It looked like a building signature, but in an area that was supposed to be uninhabited wilderness. Maya adjusted the sensitivity settings and initiated a secondary scan at higher resolution. The return remained faint but persistent, as if it had been waiting for someone to notice it. She sat motionless for several seconds, listening to the distant sounds of the fire camp, then made a decision that would change everything. She flagged the anomaly in her personal log and entered a detailed notation: possible structure thermal signature, unidentified location southeast of containment sector 4. She tagged it with precise timestamps and environmental conditions, then saved the entry to her own system rather than the official database. It wasn't enough evidence to escalate through proper channels, but it was definitely something worth investigating. Maya opened the communication line to her shift supervisor, Battalion Chief Winters, who was one building away, preparing resource allocations for the next operational period. His voice came through layered with static and the background chatter of the ongoing shift change. When she explained what she had observed, his response was immediate and dismissive. "Equipment ghost," he said without hesitation. "Residual heat from the controlled burn yesterday or thermal reflection off rock faces. Happens all the time in canyons." Maya clarified that the signal profile didn't match any natural features or controlled burn patterns from the database. Winters pushed back harder, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Look, Chen, the contact is probably just a false reading from a hot spot we already extinguished. One of the ground teams reported unusual thermal patterns in that area yesterday. The operation is focused on the main fire front. We're not in detection mode right now." When she requested permission to conduct a secondary verification using the mobile thermal unit, Winters paused longer before responding. The delay told her everything she needed to know. "Negative on additional surveys right now. Tag it in your personal log if you want, but that's the end of it. We're not wasting resources chasing ghosts when we have a real fire to fight." Maya didn't argue. She had learned that pushing too hard too fast only made supervisors more resistant to listening. She acknowledged the order and closed the communication channel, but her certainty had only grown stronger. The dismissal felt too quick, too automatic. Winters hadn't even asked to see her data or review the signal characteristics. He had simply shut down the inquiry based on assumptions. She reached into her equipment bag beneath her desk and pulled out her laminated topographical map. The map unfolded across her lap in soft, familiar creases. She had marked it before. The fire began and covered it with her own pencil notes and weather observations accumulated over the past week. Near the eastern boundary, a handwritten circle marked an old logging trail that had been closed years. earlier due to hazardous conditions and environmental protection measures. She had highlighted that area on the first day of operations more from habit than specific directive. Standard procedure was to track all access routes that might affect firefighting patterns. Maya placed her finger at the edge of the abandoned trail and traced a projected path forward through the wilderness. The anomaly she had detected lay directly along that projected path. Not perfectly aligned, but close enough for a structure that might not appear on official maps. Close enough for someone in trouble. The mathematics supported her theory. The environmental readings matched the thermal signature she had observed. Her intuition, honed by months of careful observation, told her the contact was real. Not dramatic, not definitively proven, but quietly, persistently real. She drew a small circle over the contact point, then traced a thinner line backward, mapping the most likely access route to that location. The trajectory made sense. Someone could have a cabin or shelter in that remote area, accessed by the old logging trail, now potentially trapped by the fire's unexpected shift. The systems panel blinked once behind her, indicating that the diagnostic timer had finished its cycle. Automated shutdown would begin in minutes. Maya refolded the map, tucked it into her vest pocket, and rose from her station. Her boots hit the floor with quiet determination as she walked the length of the room without looking back. In the hallway, voices floated up from the lower level where off-duty firefighters had gathered around someone's portable speaker. Music played faintly through the doorway, followed by laughter that seemed to come from a different world entirely. She moved past the relaxation area without breaking stride, used her access card to enter the secondary systems room, and waited for the backup terminal to warm up. There, she reopened the thermal record and pulled up the saved anomaly. Instead of deleting it as ordered, she reclassified the entry under a new label: Terrain Anomaly. Review required post-operation. The new designation would bury the contact deep in the system archives, but it wouldn't erase the data. Anyone conducting a thorough post-incident review would still find it if they knew where to look. Maya attached her initials to the modified entry and saved it to the permanent database. No one would notice the filing tonight, but the information would remain logged and accessible. She had learned to work within the system rather than against it. Sometimes the most important discoveries were the ones that waited patiently in the shadows, preserved by someone who understood that today's dismissal might become tomorrow's critical evidence. She sat in the dim light of the auxiliary room for several more minutes, her eyes fixed on the screen where the thermal signature continued to blink softly before fading into the background display. The signal was still there, still real, still waiting for someone to take it seriously. Maya remained at her post until the last trace disappeared, then logged out of the system and secured the terminal. She had done what she could within the constraints of protocol. Now she could only hope that her quiet vigilance would prove meaningful when the time came. The operations center had settled into the subdued rhythm of night operations. Most displays cycled through infrared updates and archived data sets, their screens casting shifting patterns of light across the darkened room. Overhead, the shift change indicators had switched from red to green, signaling the transition to overnight crew operations. Maya stood near the central console, her notebook pressed tight against her side, its worn cover a familiar comfort in the high-tech environment. The screen in front of her displayed the anomalous contact with no priority flag, just a timestamp and coordinate set. She had entered the data an hour earlier and found herself unable to look away. The ambient noise in the room had shifted as officers clustered around strategy stations. Their conversations were already transforming the day's operations into war stories. Analysts leaned back in their chairs, half listening to radio updates from the field teams. The large overhead monitors looped footage of dramatic helicopter water drops and bulldozers creating fire breaks. The careful analytical work that made those operations possible never appeared in these highlight reels. Maya refreshed the thermal log and cross-referenced her contact again. The signature remained unchanged from her earlier observations. The heat spike had lasted under 10 seconds, but its pattern matched structural characteristics rather than natural terrain features. Maya loaded her annotated thermal overlay onto the console and projected it onto the topographical map. The map was an older version, hand-marked and covered with her personal notes and calculations accumulated over months of careful observation. When the overlay resolved on screen, the mystery contact appeared positioned precisely along the edge of the abandoned logging trail. She traced its probable location with her fingertip, measuring against the fire vector that had been logged hours earlier. The alignment was undeniable. Battalion Chief Winters approached from behind, his footsteps heavy on the floor. He was sharp-featured, efficient, and perpetually projecting authority in every interaction. He frowned as he caught sight of her display and gestured at the monitor with obvious irritation. "You're still tracking that ghost reading, Chun." Maya kept her voice level and professional. "The signature matches structural parameters. The geometric characteristics align with a potential cabin or shelter along the old logging route." She pointed to the overlay where the contact aligned with her projected path. "The timing and thermal profile are consistent with the structure that might be occupied." Winters tilted his head, his expression shifting from irritation to something closer to condescension. "It's residual heat from yesterday's controlled burn. The system already cleared that zone when they ran the verification sweep. The automated filters tagged and dismissed everything in that sector." He tapped the edge of the console with his knuckle. "The operation is focused on containment, Chun. No second passes on ambiguous readings. Tag it for post-incident analysis. And rotate off shift. Let the system handle what it's designed to handle." Maya asked if any confirmation surveys had been authorized for contacts outside the automated detection parameters. Winters gave a short laugh that carried no humor. "You think we're going to waste personnel and equipment on every anomaly that shows up in the noise? The computers are better at this than we are. They don't see patterns that aren't there." The implication hung in the air between them. Maya had been labeled as someone who saw patterns that weren't there, who chased ghosts in the data noise, who couldn't distinguish between real signals and system artifacts. The reputation had followed her through multiple assignments, a whispered assessment that shaped how others evaluated her observations. She nodded without expression, waiting for Winters to move on to other duties. As he walked away, Maya turned back to the console. Her hand moved toward the deletion command, then stopped. Instead of erasing the contact, she reclassified it under a maintenance review designation, terrain anomaly, historical analysis. The new tag would bury the entry even deeper in the system database, but it would also preserve the data indefinitely. Anyone conducting comprehensive post-incident reviews would eventually find it along with her detailed analysis and supporting calculations. The screen dimmed as the idle timer activated, and her thermal overlay faded from view. Maya saved her input parameters, then removed her notebook from the data reader and secured it inside her vest pocket. The familiar weight against her ribs provided a small measure of comfort. Whatever happened next, she had created a permanent record of her observations. The truth, as she understood it, would survive even if no one currently wanted to hear it. Outside in the hallway, footsteps echoed as the night shift settled into their routines. Firefighters passed her without acknowledgement, their attention focused on more immediate concerns. Near the far end of the corridor, a news crew was packing up their equipment after filming promotional footage with some of the hotshot crew members. Someone posed for a final photograph beside the impressive equipment, but the analytical work was not included in the frame. Maya stepped through the doorway into the quieter hallway beyond, walking without urgency toward her quarters. She had kept her voice calm throughout the confrontation with Winters. She had not disobeyed direct orders or violated established protocols. But she had also not allowed the contact to disappear entirely. The data would remain in the system, waiting for someone with the authority and inclination to investigate. Further, Maya had learned to work with patience rather than confrontation, to preserve possibilities rather than force immediate decisions. The weight of doubt pressed against her certainty as she made her way through the base camp's interior passages. Maybe Winters was right. Maybe she was seeing patterns in random noise, chasing ghosts that existed only in her imagination. The thought had haunted her through previous assignments, making her question every observation, every instinct, every moment of professional judgment. But the numbers in her notebook didn't lie. The thermal signatures, terrain calculations, and pattern analyses all pointed toward something real hidden in the wilderness, beyond their operational area. Maya reached her quarters and prepared for what she suspected would be a restless night. Tomorrow would bring new developments, new data, and new opportunities to prove that quiet vigilance served a purpose. She had planted seeds of information throughout the operations databases, preserved fragments of evidence that might prove meaningful when circumstances changed. Sometimes the most important discoveries emerged not from dramatic confrontations, but from the patient accumulation of small truths that eventually became impossible to ignore. The signal was still out there, still hidden, still waiting for someone to take it seriously. Maya had done everything she could within the constraints of hierarchy and protocol. Now she could only hope that her careful documentation would matter. When the moment came for action, dawn broke over the fire camp in hazy orange, the sun struggling to penetrate the thick smoke that hung in the air like a physical presence. Maya awoke before her alarm, her mind already cycling through the thermal readings from the previous day. She dressed quickly in her field gear, the familiar routine requiring no conscious thought after so many months of service. Her quarters were Spartan, a narrow cot, a small desk, and a trunk for personal belongings, but they offered a rare moment of solitude in the constant activity of fire operations. Maya checked her equipment methodically: portable weather meter, thermal scanner, field tablet, and the notebook that never left her side. The morning briefing would begin in 20 minutes. She had time to verify one theory before joining the others. Maya powered up her tablet and pulled up the historical map database, searching for records of the area where she had detected the anomalous reading. The official maps showed nothing but wilderness, but records from 30 years earlier told a different story. A small ranger outpost had once stood near that location, later decommissioned when the logging operation ceased. The structure should have been removed, but budget cuts and bureaucratic oversight might have left it standing, forgotten by all but the most detailed historical records. The discovery sent a ripple of validation through her. The thermal signature now had context, a reason to exist where the official maps showed nothing. The outpost might have become someone's unofficial shelter, perhaps a hunter or hiker caught by the rapidly advancing fire. Maya checked the latest fire progression map. The flames had accelerated overnight, pushing in multiple directions, including toward the anomaly she had detected. If someone was there, their window for escape was rapidly closing. She needed to convince someone with authority to investigate, but her previous attempts had only reinforced her reputation as someone who chased ghosts. Maya gathered her equipment and headed toward the command center, mind racing through potential approaches that might overcome the skepticism she faced. The morning briefing was already underway when she arrived, the large room crowded with team leaders and section chiefs receiving their assignments for the day. Incident Commander Rivas stood at the front, pointing to the main fire front on the large digital map. "The priority remains the western flank where we have structures at risk," he was saying. "Teams 3 through 6 will reinforce the containment line here. The eastern section has lower priority but still needs monitoring. Team 7 will maintain surveillance but no active engagement unless the situation changes." The eastern section, where Maya's anomaly was located, where a forgotten ranger outpost might be sheltering someone in desperate need of help. She waited for the briefing to conclude, watching as teams received their assignments and began filing out to their positions. When the room had cleared somewhat, Maya approached Rivas with her tablet in hand. He was conversing with Operations Chief Delgado, their attention focused on resource allocation charts. Maya waited respectfully until there was a natural pause in their conversation. "Commander Rivas," she began, "I've identified a potential structure in Sector 4 East that doesn't appear on current maps." She handed him the tablet displaying the historical records she had found. "It's an old ranger outpost that may still be standing. I've detected thermal signatures consistent with human presence." Rivas frowned, studying the information. "This area isn't on our priority list, Chun. The fire is moving slower on that flank, and we have no recorded structures at risk there. The structure wouldn't be in official records if it was supposed to be demolished," Maya explained. "But I found historical documentation showing it existed. The thermal signature I detected matches its location and shows patterns consistent with human occupation." Delgado cut in, his voice carrying the weariness of someone managing too many priorities with too few resources. "We don't have personnel to spare for investigating possible structures that might not exist. The western flank needs everyone we've got." Maya persisted, her normally quiet demeanor giving way to the urgency she felt. "I can check it myself." A quick verification with the UTV would take less than 2 hours round trip. Rivas exchanged glances with Delgado. "We need every qualified person on the main containment effort, Chen. Your skills are valuable there. The fire will reach that location by late afternoon based on current progression," Maya said, pulling up her predictive model. "If someone's there, this is the last chance to reach them." Delgado shook his head. "It's a low probability scenario based on ambiguous readings and historical maps that may be outdated. We can't divert resources from known risks to chase maybes." Maya felt the familiar frustration rising but kept her voice steady. "I understand the resource constraints, sir. But what if someone is there? What if we could have saved them but chose not to try?" The question hung in the air between them. Rivas studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "Submit your full analysis to the planning section. If they can verify your findings through other means, we'll reconsider. That's the best I can offer right now." It wasn't enough, but it was all she would get through official channels. Maya nodded, thanked him for his time, and left the command center. She had already submitted everything she knew to the planning section. They reached the clearing to find a massive pine had fallen directly across the UTV, crushing the front section and rendering it immobile. The route they had planned to take was now blocked by the fallen tree, which had brought down several smaller ones with it. "That's not good," Russell observed unnecessarily. Maya assessed the situation quickly. The tree falling wasn't random, it was a direct result of the approaching fire, weakening root systems and creating unpredictable wind patterns that toppled even seemingly healthy trees. The phenomena would only worsen as the fire drew closer. She checked her map and fire progression data. Their primary escape route was now closed. The secondary route would take them south, a longer journey through more difficult terrain, but potentially still passable. The only problem, they would have to travel on foot. "Change of plans," Maya said, retrieving essential supplies from the damaged UTV. "We're heading south toward Black Ridge Road. It's about 4 miles through rough country, but it's our best option now." Russell looked skeptical. 4 miles? "The fire will be on us before we make it halfway." "Not if we move quickly," Maya said, handing him extra water and an emergency fire shelter. "The terrain works in our favor for the first section. We'll be moving downhill and the fire tends to climb upslope more quickly than it moves down." As they prepared to depart, Maya made one final radio call, updating their situation and New evacuation route. The response was broken by static, but the message was clear enough. All available rescue resources were committed to the western flank. They were on their own. Russell watched her face as she absorbed this information. They're not coming for us, are they? Maya met his gaze directly. No, we're not a priority compared to the communities at risk on the other side of the fire. We need to save ourselves. Instead of fear, a hint of respect showed in the old man's eyes. Then we better get moving. I know these woods better than any map. There's a creek bed about a mile south that might give us better travel than the route you're thinking. Maya nodded, adjusting her mental calculations. Lead the way. But we maintain contact and move at a steady pace. No stopping unless absolutely necessary. As they left the clearing, Maya glanced back at the coordinates that had started as nothing more than an anomalous reading on her thermal scanner. Her quiet persistence had led her here to this moment, attempting a dangerous evacuation that no one had authorized and few would approve. If they made it out safely, there would be consequences for breaking protocol. If they didn't make it out at all, at least she would have the satisfaction of knowing she had been right. The thermal signature hadn't been a ghost or a system artifact. It had been a person who needed help, exactly as she had suspected. With renewed determination, Maya followed Russell into the forest, away from the approaching fire and toward what she hoped would be safety. The real test of her judgment was just beginning. The forest floor crunched beneath their boots as Maya and Russell pushed through dense underbrush. The creek bed Russell had mentioned provided easier passage than the overgrown trail, but the rocky terrain demanded careful footing. They had been moving steadily for nearly 40 minutes, maintaining a pace that balanced speed with safety. Maya checked her tablet frequently, tracking their position against the fire's advance. The main front was moving faster than predicted, accelerated by shifting winds that seemed to be drawing the flames toward them despite their southern trajectory. The smoke had thickened noticeably, reducing visibility and making each breath more labored. "How much farther to Black Ridge Road?" Maya asked, pausing briefly to check her bearings. Russell pointed toward a ridge in the distance. "Beyond that. Rise, maybe 2 miles as the crow flies, but the terrain gets steeper before it levels out." Maya calculated their remaining time against the fire's progression. "We need to pick up the pace. The wind's shifting in our direction." As if to emphasize her point, a gust of hot air swept through the creek bed, carrying the unmistakable scent of approaching fire. Ash began to drift down around them like gray snow, accumulating on their shoulders and equipment. Russell nodded grimly. "Creek bed ends about a quarter-mile ahead. After that, we're in the thick of it again." They resumed their journey with renewed urgency. Maya's radio crackled with an incoming transmission. She answered while continuing to move, hearing Battalion Chief Winter's voice breaking through the static. "Chun, your last position puts you directly in the path of a major wind shift. Fire progression has accelerated. Repeat, accelerated. You need to adjust your route immediately." "Copy that," Maya responded. "We're proceeding south toward Black Ridge. What's your recommendation?" "Satellite shows the fire has jumped containment 2 miles west of your position. Your southern route will be compromised within the hour. Nearest safe extraction point is now the eastern ridge at Cooper's Outlook." Maya stopped in her tracks. "Cooper's Outlook? That's a significant deviation from our current heading." "It's your only viable option, Chun. Eastern ridge remains clear while southern and western approaches are being overrun." Maya studied her map, quickly assessing the new information. Cooper's Outlook lay almost directly east, requiring them to cross rugged terrain that would slow their progress considerably. But if Winters was right about the southern route being compromised, they had no choice. "Copy. Adjusting route to Cooper's Outlook. 8A, approximately 90 minutes. "Make it 60, Winters replied. "After that, The access road from our side will be unreachable. We'll have a team standing by until then." The transmission ended, leaving Maya to process the implications. They had 1 hour to cross terrain that would normally take 90 minutes. Under ideal conditions. And these conditions were far from ideal. "Change of plans," she told Russell. "We need to head east instead of south. The fire's moving faster than expected." The older man squinted toward the eastern ridge, his expression dubious. "That's rough country between here and there. Lot of deadfall and steep ravines." "It's our only option now," Maya said, adjusting her pack. "Southern route will be cut off within the hour." Russell studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "You're the fire expert. I'm just the fool who didn't evacuate when I had the chance." "Save the self-criticism for when we're safely at camp," Maya replied with the ghost of a smile. "Right now we need every ounce of energy for moving." They altered their course, leaving the relative ease of the creek bed for the challenging terrain that lay between them and Cooper's Outlook. The going immediately became more difficult. Thick underbrush tore at their clothing. Hidden rocks threatened to twist ankles, and fallen trees created obstacles that required either climbing over or detouring around. The smoke continued to thicken, reducing visibility to less than 100 yards in some places. Maya pulled emergency respirator masks from her pack, handing one to Russell. "Put this on," she instructed. "The air's only going to get worse from here." 20 minutes into their eastern traverse, Maya's radio crackled again. This time, it was Rivera, the analyst who had seen her leave camp. "Chun, are you receiving? Command is tracking a spot fire that's developed northeast of your position. It's creating a potential pinch point with the main front." Maya stopped to check her tablet, but the satellite imagery was already several minutes old, too outdated to show the new development. "Can you give me coordinates for the spot fire?" Rivera relayed the numbers, which Maya quickly plotted on her map. The situation was worse than she'd feared. The new fire had started approximately a mile northeast of their position and was spreading rapidly, potentially cutting off their route to Cooper's Outlook. "Is there still an extraction team at the Outlook?" Maya asked. "Affirmative, but there are EPOR to DING deteriorating conditions. Visibility down to 50 yards and air quality reaching hazardous levels. They'll hold position for 30 more minutes. Then they have orders to pull out regardless of your status." The timeline had just been cut in half. 30 minutes to cover terrain that would challenge even the most experienced hiker under normal conditions. "Copy that. We're proceeding as quickly as possible." Maya turned to Russell, who had heard enough of the conversation to understand their situation had worsened. "We need to move faster." The older man nodded, his breathing already labored behind his mask. "Lead the way." They pushed forward with renewed desperation, scrambling up steep inclines and sliding down the other side, fighting through tangles of brush and navigating around impassable obstacles. The physical toll was evident in their ragged breathing and increasingly unsteady movements, but neither spoke of stopping or slowing down. After 15 grueling minutes, they reached the edge of a ravine that cut across their path like a scar in the earth. It was too wide to jump, too steep to descend and climb quickly. Going around would cost precious time they didn't have. "There's a fallen tree about 50 yards north," Russell said, pointing along the ravine's edge. "Might serve as a bridge." They found the fallen pine spanning the ravine, its trunk providing a precarious crossing approximately 30 feet above the rocky bottom. Maya tested its stability, finding it solid enough to support their weight if they moved carefully. "I'll go first," she said. "Wait until I'm across before you start." Maya began the crossing, moving deliberately along the trunk, using her arms for balance. The smoke swirled around her, occasionally obscuring her view of the other side. Halfway across, the tree shifted slightly, settling deeper into the earth. On the far side, she paused, heart pounding, then continued with even greater caution. When she reached the far side, she turned to signal Russell. "Come across now. Move slowly and keep your center of gravity low." The older man began his crossing, his movements more tentative than Maya's had been. He was 3/4 of the way across when a loud crack echoed through the ravine. A section of trunk beneath his feet splintered, tilting downward at a dangerous angle. Russell lunged forward, barely catching himself on the remaining solid section of the tree. He hung there, legs dangling over the ravine, fingers digging into the bark as he struggled to pull himself up. Maya rushed back onto the trunk, dropping to her stomach to distribute her weight more evenly. She inched forward until she could reach Russell's arm. "Grab my hand," she ordered, extending her arm toward him. Russell looked up, his face pale beneath the layer of ash and dirt. "You can't pull me up. You'll just go down with me." "Grab my hand now," Maya repeated, her voice leaving no room for argument. "We're getting out of this together, or not at all." Their hands clasped, and Maya braced herself against the trunk, using her legs and free arm to anchor them both. With a strength born of desperation, she began pulling Russell upward, inch by painful inch. The muscles in her shoulders and back screamed in protest, but she refused to relent. Russell found a foothold on a protruding branch and pushed upward, helping to propel himself onto the more stable section of the trunk. Together, they crawled the remaining distance to solid ground, collapsing side by side on the forest floor, chests heaving with exertion. "Told you. You were dead weight," Russell gasped between breaths, attempting humor despite their dire situation. Maya managed a grim smile. "Save your breath. We're not safe yet." Indeed, the air had grown noticeably hotter, and the smoke was now a dense curtain that limited visibility to mere yards. In the distance, they could hear the distinctive roar of the advancing fire, a sound like a freight train bearing down on them with implacable force. Maya checked her tablet, but the satellite connection had failed, leaving them without updated fire progression data. Her radio still functioned, though the signal was weaker than before. "Rivera, do you copy? We've cleared the ravine but need updated position on the spot fire." The response came broken and distorted. "Northeast of you. Creating corridor. Oxygen depleted. Immediate evacuation." The transmission cut out entirely, leaving them with fragments that painted an alarming picture. Maya made a quick decision. "We need to run. Now the spot fire is creating a corridor that's sucking oxygen from our area." They pushed on through the increasingly hostile terrain, each step requiring more effort than the last as the air thinned and filled with smoke and ash. Maya found herself supporting Russell more frequently as the older man's energy flagged. His breathing had become shallow and rapid, a dangerous sign in these conditions. "Just need a minute," Russell gasped, stumbling to one knee. Maya knelt beside him, checking his pulse and respiration. No time to rest. The fire's creating its own weather system. It's pulling oxygen from around us to fuel itself. That's why it's getting harder to breathe. Russell nodded weakly, understanding the science even as his body struggled to cope with the effects. How much farther? Maya squinted through the smoke toward what she hoped was still their destination. Less than half a mile to Cooper's Outlook. But we've got maybe 15 minutes before the extraction team leaves. With Maya's help, Russell regained his feet. They continued their desperate journey, now moving as one, Maya supporting Russell's weight as they staggered through the suffocating forest. The terrain had leveled somewhat, but the environmental conditions more than compensated for this. Small mercy. The temperature continued to rise, and breathing became an increasingly conscious effort. Maya's training had covered these conditions, the preliminary effects of a fire created oxygen deficit combined with smoke inhalation and heat exhaustion. She knew they were approaching the limits of human endurance. "Keep talking to me," she urged Russell, Tell me about your cabin. Why that spot? The question was partly to assess his mental state, and partly to keep him focused on something other than their dire circumstances. Russell coughed violently before answering. Found it? By accident. Was hiking. Got caught in a storm. Cabin was abandoned, but solid. Felt right, like it was. Waiting for me. What were you doing before that? Maya prompted. Guiding them around a fallen tree. Engineer. For 30 years, Bridges mainly, got tired of people, wanted quiet. Maya nodded, understanding the appeal of solitude. The box you brought, what's in it? Russell's grip on her shoulder tightened slightly. My life's work, designs, for a new type of suspension bridge, more efficient, safer in earthquakes. The revelation surprised Maya. You've been working on bridge designs in a cabin in the wilderness for 15 years? Some problems need silence to solve, Russell managed, his voice growing weaker. Almost there. Breakthrough last month. Maya felt a surge of determination. This man's life work couldn't end here, lost to a fire in the wilderness. His contribution, whatever it might be, deserved to reach the world. We're getting you and your designs out of here, she promised. Just a little farther now. Through the thickening smoke, Maya caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a clearing ahead. Cooper's outlook was a viewpoint perched on the eastern ridge, accessible by a narrow road that wound up from the valley below. If the extraction team was still there, it would be in that clearing. Almost there, she encouraged Russell, who was now leaning heavily against her, his steps becoming increasingly uncoordinated. As they approached the clearing, a new sound cut through the roar of the distant fire, the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors. Maya's heart leapt. The extraction team hadn't left yet. They emerged from the tree line into the relative openness of the outlook. Through swirling smoke, Maya could make out the shape of a helicopter on the small landing area, its rotors turning slowly, not yet at takeoff speed, but prepared for immediate departure. Here, she shouted, waving her free arm while supporting Russell with the other. We're here. Figures moved toward them through the smoke, 2 firefighters in full protective gear, faces obscured behind masks and shields. They reached Maya and Russell, immediately taking the older man's weight from her exhausted shoulders. You made it with 3 minutes to spare, one of them shouted over the noise of the helicopter and the approaching fire. Any longer, and we'd have been gone. Maya felt a wave of relief so intense it nearly buckled her knees. The firefighters helped Russell toward the helicopter while she followed on unsteady legs. The pilot was gesturing urgently for them to hurry, pointing to the west where the sky had turned an apocalyptic orange-red. As they reached the helicopter, Maya turned for one last look at the forest they had traversed. What she saw froze her. Blood. The spot fire from the northeast had merged with the main front, creating a wall of flame that was advancing toward their position with terrifying speed. The fire was generating its own wind, a phenomenon she had studied but never witnessed. Firsthand, a vortex of flame that consumed everything in its path. Get in now. The pilot shouted through his headset, the urgency in his voice unmistakable. The firefighters had already secured Russell in the helicopter. One of them reached out to help Maya aboard, but she hesitated, transfixed by the approaching inferno. In that moment, she understood with perfect clarity what they had just escaped. Another 5 minutes, perhaps even 3, and they would have been overtaken. A hand gripped her arm firmly, pulling her into the helicopter. The door slammed shut beside her, and the aircraft immediately began to rise, its engine straining against the turbulent, superheated air. Through the window, Maya watched as Cooper's outlook disappeared beneath them, engulfed by smoke and then flame mere seconds after their departure. The helicopter banked sharply eastward, away from the advancing fire and toward the safety of the fire camp miles away. In the cabin, medics were already attending to Russell, fitting him with an oxygen mask and checking his vital signs. Maya accepted a mask from another medic, the cool, clean oxygen flooding her lungs like a miracle after the smoke-filled forest. "You two cut it extremely close," the medic told her as he checked her pulse and oxygen levels. "Another couple of minutes and we'd be having a very different conversation." Maya nodded, too exhausted to speak. She glanced at Russell, relieved to see his color improving slightly under the oxygen therapy. His wooden box remained clutched tightly against his chest, even in his semi-conscious state. The radio in the helicopter crackled with an incoming transmission. The pilot adjusted his headset, then looked back at Maya. "Someone named Winters is demanding to speak with you," he said, holding out a spare headset. "Says it's urgent." Maya took the headset with reluctance, anticipating the reprimand that was sure to come. She had violated protocols, ignored direct orders, and risked her life and others in the process. From a strict procedural standpoint, her actions were indefensible. "Chun here," she said, her voice raspy despite the oxygen. Winter's voice came through with surprising clarity. "Chun, confirm your status and the civilian's condition." "We're both receiving oxygen. The civilian is stable but suffering from smoke inhalation and exhaustion. I'm functional." There was a pause before Winters spoke again. "The eastern ridge is completely overrun. Cooper's outlook no longer exists. Satellite confirms the fire. Created a convection column that accelerated spread beyond all models. Your extraction was the last possible window." Maya absorbed this information silently. The near miss had been even closer than she'd realized. "You disobeyed direct orders, Chun," Winters continued, his tone shifting. "You endangered yourself. And potentially the extraction team." "Yes, sir," Maya acknowledged, seeing no point in denial. "You also," Winters added after a weighted pause, "saved a life that would have been lost without your intervention. Your thermal anomaly was real. Your assessment of its significance was correct. And your actions, while procedurally questionable, were ultimately justified by the outcome." The admission stunned Maya into momentary silence. She had expected discipline, not validation. "The incident will require a full review," Winters continued. "But I wanted you to know that your initial detection and analysis have been recognized as exemplary. The rest we'll sort out when you return to base." "Thank you, sir," Maya managed, unsure how else to respond to this unexpected turn. "Get yourself checked out when you land," Winters concluded. "We'll debrief once medical clears you both." The transmission ended, leaving Maya to process what had just occurred. For the first time in her career, her observations had been not only confirmed but explicitly acknowledged as valuable. The validation should have felt triumphant, but in her exhausted state, it merely registered as a quiet relief. She removed the headset and leaned back against the helicopter's vibrating wall, closing her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, she found Russell watching her from beneath his oxygen mask. "You saved my life," he said, his voice muffled but audible, "when everyone else would have written me off as a ghost in the data." Maya shook her head slightly. "I just followed the evidence. The thermal signature was real. You were real." "Most would have dismissed it," Russell insisted. "Most did dismiss it, from what I heard, but you didn't. You trusted your analysis even when no one else did." There was a depth of understanding in his eyes that suggested he knew something about being dismissed and overlooked. Perhaps that was why he had retreated to the wilderness in the first place, to escape a world that hadn't valued his insights. "Your bridge designs," Maya said. "Are they really something new?" Russell nodded, his hand still protective over the wooden box. "Revolutionary, potentially, if anyone ever sees them." "They will now," Maya assured him. "Because you're getting out of this alive." The older man studied her face for a moment. "We both are, because someone finally listened to you." The helicopter continued its journey eastward, carrying them away from the inferno that had nearly claimed their lives. Below them, the landscape transformed from burning forest to scorched earth to the relative safety of established fire lines. In the distance, the fire camp appeared, a hive of activity amid the smoke-shrouded wilderness. Maya felt the weight of the past hours in every muscle, every breath. She had risked everything on her conviction that a faint signal meant something real and important. That risk had paid off in the most fundamental way possible, a life saved that would otherwise have been lost. As the helicopter began its descent toward the landing zone, Maya allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. Not in defying protocols or proving others wrong, but in the simple act of trusting her training and analysis when it mattered most. The quiet vigilance that had defined her career had finally spoken loudly enough for others to hear. And someone, not everyone, but someone who mattered, had finally listened. The helicopter touched down at the fire camp amid a flurry of activity. Medical personnel rushed forward with stretchers and equipment, prioritizing Russell, whose condition had stabilized but remained concerning after prolonged smoke exposure. Maya walked from the aircraft under her own power, though a medic stayed close at her side, occasionally steadying her when her exhausted legs threatened to buckle. The command center had transformed into a hive of focused energy. The main fire's unexpected behavior had forced a complete reassessment of containment strategies, and teams were being rapidly redeployed to address new threats. Amid this controlled chaos, Maya was guided to the medical tent for evaluation. Oxygen saturation is below optimal, but improving, the attending physician noted, removing the monitoring clip from Maya's finger. Mild dehydration, moderate smoke inhalation, and exhaustion consistent with extreme physical exertion. You need fluids, rest, and continued oxygen therapy. Maya nodded, accepting the diagnosis without argument. Her body had no energy left for resistance. She glanced toward the other end of the medical tent where Russell was receiving more intensive treatment, his wooden box of designs placed carefully beside his cot. "How is he?" she asked. The physician followed her gaze. "Stable. His age makes the smoke exposure more concerning, but he's responding well to treatment. We'll keep him overnight for observation, then likely transfer him to the regional hospital tomorrow." Maya leaned back on her cot, relief washing over her. They had made it out, both of them, against staggering odds. The thermal anomaly that everyone had dismissed as noise had been real. A human life had hung in the balance, just as she'd suspected. Shun. She turned to see Incident Commander Rivas standing at the entrance to the medical tent, his expression unreadable. "Sir," she acknowledged, attempting to sit straighter despite her exhaustion. Rivas approached her cot, his movement precise and controlled as always. "The medical team says you'll make a full recovery, no permanent damage." "Yes, sir. I've been fortunate." He nodded once, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, placing it on the table beside her cot. It was her notebook, the one she'd carried throughout the fire season, documenting observations that others had routinely dismissed. "You dropped this during evacuation," he said. "Chief Winters thought you might want it back." Maya picked up the notebook, its familiar weight somehow grounding in the chaos of the day. "Thank you, sir." Rivas remained standing beside her cot, seemingly on the verge of saying something more. The typical command presence he projected had softened, almost imperceptibly. "The Operational Review Board will meet tomorrow at 0900, he finally said. "They'll want your full account of today's events." Maya understood the implication. Her actions would be scrutinized, her decisions questioned, her violations of protocol documented. It was standard procedure after any incident involving risk. To personnel, "I'll be prepared to provide a complete report," she said. Rivas studied her face for a moment. "Make sure you include everything, Chun. Every observation, every calculation, every instinct that led you to act as you did. The board needs to understand your complete process." There was something in his tone that didn't match the formal words, a hint of support rather than criticism. Before Maya could respond, Rivas continued. Chief Winters has already submitted his preliminary assessment. He's noted that your initial detection and analysis of the thermal anomaly demonstrated exceptional attention to detail and professional judgment. Maya blinked in surprise. Winters had been her most consistent critic, the voice that had dismissed her observations most quickly and completely. The satellite review confirms that the fire behavior in that sector exhibited unprecedented acceleration, Rivas added. No standard model would have predicted the convection column that formed. Your evacuation window was indeed as narrow as you assessed. He paused, glancing toward Russell's bed across the tent. The civilian has provided his initial statement. As well, he was quite emphatic about your actions during the evacuation. Sir? Maya questioned, uncertain what Russell might have said. He described how you pulled him to safety when the tree bridge collapsed. Used the phrase, dragged me through fire, rather colorfully. Said most people would have left him behind as dead weight. Maya shook her head slightly. That's not accurate, sir. I couldn't have left him. That was never an option. Perhaps not for you, Rivas acknowledged. But it illuminates something important about your character that complements your technical expertise. He straightened, returning to his more formal demeanor. Rest now. We'll discuss the full implications after the review board concludes. As he turned to leave, Maya called after him. Commander Rivas, the thermal monitoring protocols for the eastern sector, will they be adjusted based on today's findings? Rivas paused, looking back at her with the hint of a smile. Already implemented, Chen. Your detection parameters have been uploaded to the system as the new baseline. Chief Winters insisted on it personally. With that, he departed, leaving Maya to process this unexpected development. The same detection methods that had been dismissed as excessive and unnecessary were now being adopted as standard procedure. The same observations that had earned her mockery were now being recognized as valuable. The validation should have felt triumphant, but in her exhausted state, it merely registered as a quiet affirmation. She had been right, not because of luck or coincidence, but because of meticulous attention to patterns that others had overlooked. Her persistence had saved a life that would otherwise have been lost to the flames. Maya closed her eyes, allowing the oxygen therapy and fatigue to pull her towards sleep. Tomorrow would bring official reviews and formal statements, but today had already delivered the only verdict that truly mattered. Her quiet vigilance had made a difference when it counted most. The morning light filtered through the medical tent's canvas, casting everything in a soft golden glow that belied the seriousness of the continuing fire operation outside. Maya sat on the edge of her cot, freshly showered and dressed in the clean uniform that someone had brought for her during the night. Her notebook lay open beside her, pages filled with her precise handwriting detailing the events of the previous day. The medical team had cleared her for light duty, though they recommended another 24 hours of rest before returning to full operational status. Maya had accepted their assessment without argument, knowing that her body needed recovery time, even if her mind was already racing ahead to the review board meeting. Across the tent, Russell was sitting up in his bed, talking animatedly with someone Maya recognized as Dr. Eliza Morgan, the Regional Director of Emergency Management. The wooden box containing his bridge designs lay open between them, revealing detailed drawings and what appeared to be complex mathematical equations. Dr. Morgan was nodding with increasing enthusiasm as Russell explained something, pointing to specific elements in his designs. Maya watched the interaction with quiet satisfaction. Whatever breakthrough Russell had achieved in his years of solitude would now reach the world, potentially improving structural engineering in ways that might save countless lives. His isolation hadn't been a retreat from contribution, but a different path toward it, one that required space and time away from conventional thinking. A nurse approached Maya's cot. "There's someone here to see you before the review board." Maya expected Rivas or perhaps Winters, preparing her for the upcoming scrutiny. Instead, she looked up to see Tomas Rivera, the analyst who had witnessed her departure the previous day. He stood awkwardly at the tent entrance, holding a tablet and looking uncharacteristically hesitant. "Rivera," she acknowledged, gesturing for him to approach. He moved to her bedside, his expression a mixture of professional respect and personal concern. "How are you feeling?" "Functioning," she replied with a small smile. "Medical says I'll be fine with rest." Rivera nodded, then held out the tablet. "I thought you might want to see this before the review board meeting. It's the final analysis of the fire behavior in Sector 4 East." Maya took the device, studying the detailed progression maps and atmospheric data that covered the screen. The information confirmed what she had experienced firsthand: the unprecedented acceleration of the fire front, the formation of a convection column that created its own weather system, and the narrow evacuation window that had closed mere minutes after their helicopter departed. "The standard models missed it completely," Rivera explained, pointing to comparison charts. "But your detection parameters picked up the early indicators. I've been running simulations all night based on your methodology. It's consistently more accurate in detecting anomalous fire behavior." Maya looked up from the tablet. "You implemented my detection parameters in the simulation?" Rivera nodded. "After what happened yesterday, I wanted to understand your approach more thoroughly. Your attention to micro-patterns that most of us filter out as background noise, it's revealing things our standard protocols miss entirely." He hesitated, then continued more quietly. "I should have paid more attention when you tried to highlight these patterns before. Many of us should have." The admission clearly cost him some professional pride, but he offered it without reservation. Maya appreciated the honesty more than any effusive praise. "The models are only as good as the parameters we set," she said. "And sometimes important signals don't match our expectations of what they should look like." Rivera took the tablet back, swiping to a new screen. "I've drafted a proposal for implementing your detection methodology across all sectors. Chief Winters has already approved it for consideration by the command team." Maya blinked in surprise. "Winters approved it?" "Enthusiastically," Rivera confirmed. "Said something about recognizing expertise even when it comes in unexpected packages." Before Maya could respond, a staff officer appeared at the tent entrance. "Specialist Chen, the review board is assembling now. They've requested your presence." Maya stood, gathering her notebook and straightening her uniform. Rivera gave her an encouraging nod as she passed. "They've already seen the data. The facts speak for themselves." The operations center had been reconfigured for the review proceedings. A long table had been set up at the front, where 5 senior officers sat reviewing documents and displays. Additional chairs had been arranged in rows, occupied by various team leaders and specialists whose input might be relevant to the review. Maya was directed to a seat positioned directly before the board, isolated enough to emphasize her status as the subject of examination. Battalion Chief Winters sat at the center of the panel, flanked by Commander Rivas and 3 other senior officers Maya recognized from Regional Command. Their expressions revealed nothing as she took her seat, notebook placed precisely on the small table before her. "This review board is now in session," Winters began formally. "We are examining the events of yesterday, specifically the detection, verification, and evacuation of a civilian from an unregistered structure in Sector 4 East during active fire conditions." He looked directly at Maya. "Specialist Chen, this board has reviewed your written statement and the preliminary data. We now invite you to present your account of the incident in your own words, with particular attention to the decision points that led to your actions." Maya stood, her posture professional despite the lingering fatigue in her muscles. "Thank you, sir." I'll begin with the initial thermal detection 3 days ago and the pattern analysis that led me to believe it represented a potentially occupied structure. For the next 30 minutes, Maya presented a detailed account of her observations, calculations, and decisions. She explained the thermal anomalies that had first caught her attention, the historical maps that suggested a forgotten ranger outpost, and the progression of events that led to her unauthorized verification mission. She described the evacuation, the loss of their primary transportation, and the desperate journey to Cooper's Outlook with clinical precision, neither dramatizing nor minimizing the dangers they had faced. Throughout her presentation, the board members listened attentively, occasionally making notes, but not interrupting. When she finished, Winters leaned forward slightly. "You've provided a comprehensive technical account, Specialist Chen. Now, I'd like you to address the human element. Why did you persist when your concerns were repeatedly dismissed? What motivated you to risk your career and potentially your life on an anomalous reading that everyone else had classified as background noise?" The question went beyond protocols and procedures into territory Maya rarely discussed. She took a moment to organize her thoughts before responding. "Throughout my career, I've observed that systems are designed to detect what we expect to find. When something falls outside those parameters, it's often filtered out as irrelevant noise. But sometimes, what we dismiss as noise contains the most important signal, one that doesn't match our preconceptions of what it should look like." She paused, glancing down at her notebook before continuing. "I persisted because the pattern was real, even if it didn't fit the standard detection models. The thermal signature had characteristics that were consistent with human presence, not natural phenomena. Someone's life depended on that distinction being recognized, even when your superior officers explicitly ordered you to drop the matter." One of the other board members asked. Maya met his gaze directly. "With respect, sir, I never directly violated orders until the evacuation became time-critical. I preserved the data through proper channels, reclassifying it rather than deleting it. I continued my analysis on my own time. And when the situation became urgent due to the fire's acceleration, I made the judgment call that saving a life outweighed strict adherence to protocol." Winters studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once and turned to the rest of the panel. "Are there further questions for Specialist Chen?" The officers conferred briefly, then indicated they had nothing more to ask. Winters turned back to Maya. "Thank you for your testimony, Specialist Chen. Please remain available while the board deliberates." Maya returned to her seat, aware of the eyes watching her from around the room. Some expressions held newfound respect, others remained skeptical, but none showed the dismissive mockery that had once been so familiar. The board's deliberation was surprisingly brief. After less than 15 minutes, they returned to their positions, and Winters called the review back to order. "Specialist Maya Chen, please approach the board." Maya stood before them, her posture straight despite the uncertainty of what was to come. "This board has reviewed all available evidence regarding your actions during the Sector 4 East incident," Winters began formally. "We have considered the detection methodologies employed, the verification procedures undertaken, and the evacuation decisions made under extreme conditions." He paused, looking directly at Maya. "Your initial detection of the thermal anomaly demonstrated exceptional attention to detail and professional expertise. Your persistence in tracking and documenting this anomaly, despite its dismissal by automated systems and superior officers, ultimately saved a human life that would otherwise have been lost." Maya remained silent, sensing there was more to come. "However," Winters continued, "your decision to conduct a solo verification mission without proper authorization constituted a serious breach of operational protocol. Your subsequent actions during the evacuation, while successful, placed both yourself and potentially the extraction team at risk." The room had grown completely silent, everyone waiting for the final determination. After careful consideration, this board finds that your actions, while procedurally irregular, were justified by the extraordinary circumstances and the life-saving outcome. The detection methodology you developed has been approved for implementation across all operational sectors, and your analysis protocols will be incorporated into standard training for all fire behavior specialists. Maya blinked, processing the unexpected validation. Furthermore, Winters added, this board recommends your advancement to Senior Fire Behavior Analyst, with additional responsibilities for training new personnel in advanced detection methodologies. The official citation will note your exceptional professional judgment and personal courage in the face of both institutional skepticism and physical danger. Rivas spoke for the first time during the proceedings. The promotion comes with transfer options. Specialist Chen, Regional Command has expressed interest in having you develop a comprehensive training program for anomaly detection across multiple jurisdictions. Maya found her voice. Thank you. Sir, I'm grateful for the opportunity to share these methodologies more widely. Winters nodded, then delivered the final pronouncement. This review is concluded. The board's full findings will be available in the official record by end of day. As the formal session ended, the room broke into small groups discussing the implications of the decision. Maya gathered her notebook, still processing the outcome. The validation of her methods was professionally satisfying, but the knowledge that her persistence had saved a life provided a deeper, more personal affirmation. Commander Rivas approached as she prepared to leave. The regional assignment would be a significant advancement. Shun, your expertise would influence fire response protocols across 7 states. It's an honor to be considered, Maya replied. But I'd like some time to consider the options. Rivas nodded understanding, of course. There's someone else who wants to speak with you before you make any decisions. He gestured toward the entrance where Russell stood waiting. The older man looked remarkably recovered after his ordeal, though oxygen tubing still ran beneath his nose. He carried his wooden box of designs under one arm. Maya approached him, genuine pleasure warming her expression. You should be resting. Russell shook his head. Rested enough. Wanted to catch you before all this bureaucracy swept you away. He glanced around the operations center with the wariness of someone who had deliberately chosen a life away from such environments. I understand congratulations are in order, he continued. They're finally recognizing what you can do. It seems so, Maya acknowledged. Though I suspect saving the life of a brilliant bridge designer helped make my case. Russell smiled slightly. About that, Dr. Morgan thinks my designs could revolutionize bridge safety in earthquake zones. She's arranged meetings with the State Engineering Board next month. That's wonderful, Maya said, truly pleased for him. Your work will reach the world after all. 15 years of solitude to solve one problem, Russell mused. Most people would call that a waste of time. But some solutions require patient observation of patterns others miss. The parallel to Maya's own experience wasn't lost on her. They had both persisted in their methodical work despite dismissal and isolation, convinced that the patterns they observed held meaning even when others couldn't see it. What will you do now? She asked. Return to the cabin? Russell shook his head. That chapter's closed. The cabin's gone anyway. Nothing but ash now according to the satellite. Images. Time to bring these designs into the world. See if they can make a difference. He studied her face for a moment. And you? Will you take the regional position? Maya considered the question. The promotion offered professional validation and broader influence, but something about it didn't feel quite right. I'm not sure. Yet, I need to think about where I can be most effective. Consider this, Russell said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. The world is full of people who filter out signals they don't expect to find, who dismiss anomalies as noise because they don't fit established patterns. Sometimes what's needed isn't just new detection methods. but people willing to look where others don't, to persist when others have moved on. He gestured toward the operations center around them. Your skills are valuable here, but perhaps they'd be even more valuable somewhere that doesn't yet recognize what they're missing. The suggestion resonated with something Maya had been feeling but hadn't fully articulated. Her promotion represented acknowledgement from a system that had already dismissed her repeatedly. Perhaps her greatest contribution would come in environments that still needed to learn the value of seeing patterns others missed. I appreciate the perspective, she said. It gives me something important to consider. Russell nodded, seemingly satisfied that his message had landed. Whatever you decide, don't let them turn you into someone who only sees what they expect to find. That quiet vigilance of yours, it matters more than they know. 3 months later, Maya stood in a very different operations center. The Pacific Northwest Seismic Monitoring Initiative occupied a converted warehouse in Seattle, its spaces filled with equipment that detected and analyzed the subtle movements of the Earth along the Cascadia subduction zone. Here, the smallest anomalies could provide critical early warnings of potential disasters affecting millions of lives. Her new role as advanced pattern analysis specialist came with both freedom and responsibility that exceeded anything in her previous position. The seismic monitoring teams had initially viewed her fire behavior experience as tangential to their work, but her methodologies for detecting subtle pattern anomalies had quickly proven valuable across disciplines. Maya had brought her notebook with her, its pages now filled with new observations and calculations. But she no longer worked in isolation. Her desk was positioned at the center of the analysis floor, surrounded by junior specialists who had been assigned to learn her methodologies directly. The monitor before her displayed a slight irregularity in the data stream, nothing that would trigger automated alerts, but a pattern that didn't quite match historical norms. Once, such an anomaly might have been filtered out as background noise. Now it received careful human attention alongside the automated systems. "What are you seeing?" asked Dr. Harrison, the project director who had initially been skeptical of hiring someone without traditional seismology credentials. Maya indicated the pattern on her screen. These micro-tremors show a periodicity that's shifted by approximately 3–8% from the baseline. It's subtle but consistent across the last 72 hours. Harrison studied the data, his expertise in earth sciences complementing Maya's pattern recognition skills. Could be nothing. Could be, Maya agreed. But it's worth investigating. Further, the director nodded without hesitation. Allocate whatever resources you need. Your team has full access to the sensor array. The easy acceptance of her assessment still surprised Maya sometimes. Here, her attention to subtle anomalies wasn't dismissed as excessive or paranoid. It was valued as an essential complement to the automated systems, a human element that could detect patterns machines weren't programmed to recognize. As Harrison moved on to other stations, Maya's tablet chimed with an incoming message. It was from Russell, now working with a major engineering firm to implement his bridge designs across several earthquake-prone regions. Their correspondence had continued since the fire, a friendship built on mutual respect for patient observation and persistent vision. The message contained a news article about a small fire behavior unit in Montana that had successfully predicted an unexpected fire acceleration using detection methods pioneered by a former analyst now working in seismic monitoring. The article quoted Battalion Chief Winters praising the methodology's effectiveness in saving both lives and resources. Maya smiled as she read the report. Her work had continued to make a difference even after she'd moved on to new challenges. The quiet vigilance she had practiced in isolation had become a shared approach, spreading beyond her personal influence to become part of standard procedure. A junior analyst approached her desk, tablet in hand. "I've been tracking that anomaly pattern you identified. There's something here I think you should see." Maya turned her attention to the new data, ready to apply the same careful observation and analytical persistence that had defined her approach throughout her career. The specific signals might change from fire behavior to seismic patterns, but the fundamental principle remained constant. Sometimes the most important discoveries began as faint signals that others classified as noise. In a world increasingly dominated by automated systems and algorithmic decision-making, Maya had found her true value not in replacing those systems, but in complementing them with the uniquely human ability to recognize patterns that didn't match established expectations. Her quiet vigilance had evolved from a personal methodology into a professional philosophy that was now influencing fields far beyond her original expertise. As she analyzed the new anomaly with her team, Maya felt the satisfaction of knowing that she no longer walked alone in her attentiveness to the patterns others missed. The signals she had once struggled to make others hear were now being amplified through a network of professionals trained to listen for what might otherwise be dismissed as background noise. Her journey had come full circle, from being called dead weight to carrying others through fire, from isolation to influence, from dismissal to recognition. The path had not been easy, but it had led to exactly where she needed to be, a place where quiet vigilance was finally understood as the life-saving force it had always been. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. From us